Okay, and we are live. So, thank you everyone for joining us tonight at the Truth of the Matter podcast with Dr. Spencer. And I am honored to have Miss Ann Visser, who is a coach, speaker, and trainer herself. And so, as she and I were talking earlier, I said, I like to hear other perspectives. Because again, I always say that when we attended school, we didn't go to one class, right? You heard it from different perspectives. And I like that. So, Miss Visser, thank you so very much for joining us. I appreciate you for coming.
Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome, Lamar, and thank you for having me on the Truth of the Matter podcast with Dr. Spencer. I'm really honored to be here, and I look forward to our conversation and learning from you as well as we go along.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to get right into it. So, like we were saying earlier about, what we're going to be talking about today, because we do have people that are trying to, find love, get in and out of love, and all the sorts like that. And I thought that was imperative because, as I said earlier, I said, the people, my clients are usually people who are in some type of shattered relationships. They're trying to find their way out of it or try to correct their current relationship. And,
Mm.
sometimes it's not always one sided. It could be, multi-dimensional, I like to call it. So, and it could be, sometimes a sticky situation because sometimes we like to point the finger at the other person, and sometimes it's not. We have to be mindful and look ourselves in the mirror because we could be part of the problem as well. So let's just get, like I said, let's just get right into it. So, one thing you mentioned, we were talking about how to pivot conversations.
Mm.
How do we pivot a conversation? We're like, what does that mean exactly?
That's a great question. And I'm really on a mission. I'm on a mission, Lamar, to equip individuals and organizations to communicate in a way that aligns with their values. We've all had that moment where we're yakking at somebody in our household, whether it's our kids or our partner. And then we pick up the phone and we're so nice. Oh, hi, how are you today? And the conversation doesn't quite align with who we are. And that frustrates us. We don't like that. And so I want to equip individuals and organizations to communicate in a way that they're happy with tomorrow. The way I communicated today, I'm happy with the way I communicated today, tomorrow. And so pivotal conversations, they actually helped us, my husband and I, to fall in love again. We've been married for 42 years. And
Excellent.
yeah, 42 years. We have 5 adult children, and I'm the nana to 11 amazing grandchildren. And I've been working with individuals for over 20 years to help them to love one another. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate is because of our own struggles. And I still remember that pivotal conversation that changed everything for us. We were crazy in love. We got married. I was young, and I still, the photographer said, I've never seen a couple look at each other the way the two of you look at each other. So we were kind of crazy in love, right? And then I was pregnant 1 month after we were married, and then we had 5 children in 6 years. And and we he worked long hours as a farmer. My husband is still a farmer, and he works very long hours. And I often felt like a single mom. So we had these external pressures, but then we had these internal pressures because I wasn't able to communicate what was happening inside of me, and neither was he. So we weren't communicating and we weren't conflicting. And we were afraid, actually really terrified to fight and to conflict. And so what we had looked more like a long, cold, silent war because we weren't talking about the important things that needed to be talked about. And so then resentment builds and builds and builds until one of us would explode. And I can still remember the moment. It was a date. We were sitting in our farm truck outside our favorite restaurant. We had had this emotional distance. It's a creeping separateness that had come into our marriage because we weren't communicating, because we weren't conflicting. And I looked at my husband and I said to him, I can't do this anymore. And he looked at me, and I could see that panic in his eyes. And he said, "What do you mean you can't do this anymore?" And I said, "I can't do marriage like this anymore. We just keep hurting each other. We don't ever resolve anything. We just go around and around the same old thing. And I'm so hurt and I'm so tired." That hit his heart in a different way than any other conversation had before. And for the first time in a long time, he shared his heart with me. And I hadn't even seen how much pain he was in. I think I was so wrapped up in my own pain. I think we sometimes get so wrapped up in our own pain, we don't see the other person. And I was so wrapped up in meeting these needs of our little ones that I missed his pain. That night, we recommitted to each other that we would get the help that we needed. And we said that on our wedding day. We said, if we need help, we will go for help. And what we should have said was, when we need help, we'll go for help. This pivotal conversation changed everything for us because we recommitted to each other that we're going to get the help that we need. And I know that if I can learn the skills, it put me on a personal growth program to become a better communicator. It put him on a personal growth program. And then it put us both on a couples program to become better communicators. We didn't even really know what the problem was. And so the very next day, I went to my mother-in-law's because she had a whole wall full of self-help books, and I pulled a book off her shelf. It was called Making Love Last Forever by Dr. Gary Smalley. And as we were reading it and applying those lessons that we were learning, we fell in love again. And now, it's not a fairy tale story. It was a choice and a decision to get better. And then it was a journey to walk out and learn the skills that we needed to communicate and to conflict better and to learn how to have those pivotal conversations that would actually continue to make a difference in our lives. Now I recognize that we're having these pivotal conversations all the time. We just don't quite realize, we don't see the moment, kind of grasp the moment. Oh, this is the moment. It's time to think about what it is that I'm thinking about, what it is that I'm feeling, what it is that I really want. And so pivotal conversations are conversations where we have these conversations because the goal here is to create a shift or a change because something is not working in the relationship. And so we pivot to help it work better. So they're going to be conversations that require some vulnerability or some honesty. That's a little bit different. And they're going to be conversations that matter to either both or one of the parties. And that's why they're a little more heated. And they're going to be conversations. And this is what I love about pivotal conversations, because they're going to bring some clarity. They're going to bring some clarity to the person or to the situation. Because then when I can hear the other person's side of the story and what's really happening for them, and their experience may be completely different than mine. And then when I can hear that, then there's better understanding between us, and more compassion can happen then between us when there's better understanding.
You brought up a lot of good points, and you're absolutely right. I've ran into situations where you're talking, but no one's really saying anything. You walk away from the conversation, and you have no idea why you're arguing. You had no idea even about the conversation. But I realized that part of that is how I was raised in my environment. I'm thinking, okay, this is what we do. We yell, we disagree. Next thing you say, hey, you want to go out? That's the way it was.
Right.
So the conflict was never resolved. And so what I had to do is retrain myself in order to help other people. Because again, sometimes when you have two people who come from different backgrounds, it's almost like you have to make a conscious decision to work together.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. And you have to pivot. So how do you pivot? Because sometimes we think that we are right. You always have to be wrong about things. But in a relationship, it's okay to say, I'm wrong. I missed it.
So often, that's true. We think we're right because it is our experience and it's what we know. So the first thing, we call it the 3 C's of pivotal conversations. And the first C is to check our emotions. I believe that there's no 50-50 relationship, that I need to bring 100% of myself to the relationship, and my husband needs to bring 100% of himself to the relationship. And one of the most challenging parts of pivotal conversations and being able to improve our ability to have them is the ability to be able to manage my own emotions. And so the first C of pivotal conversations is to check emotions. And so oftentimes, now sometimes people will say to me, yeah, but I can't do that in the moment. But I say, oh, wait a minute. These pivotal conversations, especially the ones that matter a lot, they happen over and over and over again. So there's opportunity after you've had that conversation 3 times and it's not working. There's opportunity to go to your thinking chair. That's what my chair is. It's my thinking chair, and journal out these questions. What am I thinking? What am I thinking? For me, in that first conversation that we had, that pivotal conversation, I was thinking, like, I can't keep doing this. This is not working for us. I am so hurt. Then the second question is, what am I feeling? I was honestly feeling hopeless and very frustrated and very hurt. But then the next question is, what is troubling me? What was really troubling me is that we can't solve this problem. Then thinking down the road, like, does this lead us to divorce? That's what was really underneath it all, and why I brought this conversation up. Like, I can't do this for another 40 years. And then, what do you really want? And what I really, really wanted was, I wanted to get back. We knew what it was like to love one another. I wanted to get back to loving one another again. And so when you're able to sit down and ask yourself those questions, you're not so easily triggered, because you already know, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. This is what's really troubling me here. And this is what I really want. Then you're better able to articulate those things for your spouse or your partner. And if we don't check our emotions, we sabotage the conversation before it even starts. And that's what I've noticed. I can sabotage a conversation before it even starts, just by my tone and the way I enter into that conversation and the way I kind of bristle around. Like, I don't even have to say anything and I can sabotage it before it even starts, because I'm not managing my emotions.
Oh my God.
I remember it. Yeah, doesn't that make sense, Lamarr? Yeah. I remember a time I was sitting in the kitchen with my daughter, and she was an adult, and I shared with her a conversation I needed to have with my son, and I blurted out to her, I just don't trust him. My wise daughter said, Mom, that's awful. You better check that.
Wow.
And I knew as soon as it was out of my mouth, I had a problem. And I knew that this wasn't about him. And that's what she knew too. She knew he was trustworthy. She knew there was something going on in my heart that wasn't about our son. And so then when I sat and I started going through those questions, I recognized really quickly, I didn't even have to go through them all. I recognized I was stuck back in 2005 when we had really significant challenges raising this young man. So my emotions were back in 2005, but he wasn't there anymore. He was up in the 2000s. He was a grown man, and he had changed and he had grown from there. And I thought, oh man, I would have sabotaged that pivotal conversation if I had not dealt with my heart first. I was protecting my heart because I didn't trust his motives. And so my motive became, I'm going to protect me. I'm going to protect my heart. I'm not going to let you hurt me again.
Yes. And what you said was so profound, because I find often we do get in these conversations and we automatically put our guard up. because we don't want to be hurt, because it may be something that occurred 10 or 15 years ago, and we remember what happened and how we felt in that moment, and we never want to feel like that again. So we automatically
Yes.
protect our hearts, you know, and we
Yes.
automatically go into the defense mode. So now,
Mm-hmm.
instead of what I call effectively communicating, we just start lashing out. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's, you're right, it can lead to divorce, because it's almost like it keeps snowballing. And what happens is, part of that is because not just the protection, but you think, you know what, well, it worked then, or that's just the way it's supposed to be. But it doesn't,
Mm.
it doesn't have to be that way, because this is a different person in a different relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
how can we, if we're passionate about something, how can
Mm-hmm.
we effectively communicate without bringing our emotions into it?
Mm-hmm. So, number one, I say journal out those emotions, get it out on
Mhm.
the paper. There's something so healing about being able to write out and validating, because your feelings are they're just what they are, right? But it's important
Mhm.
to validate them and even maybe recognize where they're coming from, as I was able to do when I started journaling through those questions with our about our son. And then we're able to check our hearts and just know, where is my motive? Because motives are slippery things. Because if my
Right,
motive is to protect myself, then it's not really to understand you. And so then my motives for coming to that conversation are not going to be pure, and they're going to sabotage the words that come out of my mouth before they
right.
even come out of my mouth. And so once you go through those questions, though, then you can speak that truth out. I
Yes.
feel, and that's what our therapist teaches us, right? I feel it's a soft way to start a conversation. I remember this conversation I had with my husband, Lamarr. We were driving on slippery roads up here in Canada, and I
Uh-huh.
said to him, we had this conversation many times, right? You drive too fast. That
Uh-huh.
wasn't effective. It wasn't working. And then
Yeah.
this one day I said, I don't feel safe with you in the car when we drive this fast on slippery roads.
Uh-huh.
He immediately slowed down. And I looked at him like, what just happened? Because that's not, we know each other's scripts. And I was like, what just happened? You just slowed down. And he looked at me and he said, I want you to feel safe when I'm driving the car.
Wow. Wow. So
Yeah.
you were able to pivot the conversation.
Totally. But that was because I approached it differently. Instead of attacking, you drive too fast, I said, I don't feel safe. There's the feelings. I don't feel safe with you when you drive this fast, and gave him such a small, simple conversation that actually changed. I have never had to say that to him again.
Wow. Wow. I
Can you
bet you
believe
did.
that? Like,
Yeah. I bet you did. You
that's
know, sometimes you always hear people say it's not what you say, but it's how you say it. And
yes.
to me, it's almost like what you say is intentional. And I know I've been guilty
Mm,
of this many times, where it I want to say it properly. I want to say it where, I'm not being hurtful, but it just comes out. And then, and once something comes out, you can't really retract it because it's out. It really is. And again, it's almost like a continuous thing to have to
mhm.
think about, you know, to think about somebody else's feelings. So we have a question. She said, what if you're dealing with someone who's stubborn? So what do you think about that, Ann? Take that question. Because that's a good one.
Hey, I'm married to a really good Dutchman, but you know what Dutchman, they're be a little bit stubborn.
Mhm, mhm. Uh-huh.
Everybody wants to be loved and cared for. And I have discovered that my approach to my Dutchman, it matters. And when he feels safe, he feels safe enough to let down his guard, to let me in, to not hold to his position, but to actually hear what it is that I'm saying. And so by creating that safe space, by actually listening and asking him questions like, I love this phrase, help me understand.
Yeah.
You said this, help me understand. I'm on your side. I want to hear what you have to say. And then I think about myself as pushing the mute button because I like to talk.
Yeah. Me too.
And I actually have to picture myself pushing the mute button. Be quiet, and be quiet. You know, I think it was David Osberger, he said, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they're almost indistinguishable.
Yeah. Wow. You're
S-
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I can settle my emotions, check my motives, then I can get that out and I can come to the conversation with a better heart and better able to listen because I've already got all that stuff out. I know what it is that I need to say in
Yeah.
this and what I don't need to say. I've already journaled out what I don't need to say because that's irrelevant, you
Uh-huh.
know, and and I have it really concise. So I can then sit and listen and ask questions of that stubborn person to help them feel safe so that they can open up because there's a reason why they're holding to their position. There's something important that you and I need to hear when we face a stubborn person. There's something
Right.
really important. There's gold in that conversation when we listen. And I love to have a couple sitting in front of me and we do a listening exercise. And oh my goodness, somebody will say something and I will say, did you hear what she just said? Did you hear what he just said? No. Oh, because it goes right past us, right? Because we're not listening
Yes.
to understand. We're listening to respond
Yes.
instead.
Mhm.
When we listen to understand, so I teach my people, listen for those questions too. What are they feeling? What
Yeah.
is it that really worries them here? And
Yeah.
what do they really want?
Hmm.
And when we can sit in that position and listen for those three things, then we're not thinking in our brain about, oh, but, oh, yes, but, and then get defensive because they're wrong. They're totally wrong and we're right. And then we become that
Absolutely.
right fighter that just kills relationship.
Hmm. And I
Yeah.
have to say, I mean, I've been guilty too, where I will even say, you know what? We're going to listen and not just hear because we don't want things to
Mm.
just bypass us because it's always that small part in that conversation where that person's conveying what they feel that we totally miss it. We totally discard it. So I
Yes.
completely understand. I mean, it's happened. And she brought up a good question. She said, what if you have a partner that may be jealous of your career goals and accomplishments? Well, I've had that happen.
Mm.
And I have to say, even being a relationship coach in business, I struggle with that, especially early on, because I didn't want to feel like my career or education or anything was more superior. I felt like we were a team. And I always had to constantly reiterate that, like, no, we're a team, and I always wanted to make sure. Hence, when we came on, I said, no, just call me Lamarr, right? Because I want us to be colleagues. We're going to
Mm.
learn from each other, right? We're going to pivot the communication and the conversation. And so it's not easy when you have someone, just in my experience and also working with other people, when you have someone that's jealous of your career and goals, you can say it sometimes 1,000 times like we're equal, but that person has to feel it. And sometimes it could be
Mhm.
out of your hands. In my
Mhm.
experience, in several of them, it went back to childhood, how that person was made to
Mhm.
feel. So now it's almost like you're coming into this relationship and you're paying for everything that other people have said that were hurtful
Mhm.
or whatever. So, and is it fair? No, it's not fair. It's just that,
Mhm.
again, you keep saying it over and over again, but that person has to listen to you versus you, and they have to feel it that what you're saying is in the best interest of the relationship.
Absolutely. And that is, I like what you're saying. That is a personal work that we all have to do because we all have
Mhm,
stuff, right? And we all,
mhm,
if we don't do that work, we bring it into every single relationship that we have. And then I do think that in a marriage or a committed relationship, we can help each
mhm.
other heal, which is interesting to me. And I've seen it before where someone is highly, highly triggered and the other person is able to really listen and
Yeah,
hear and understand what's going on and realize, oh, this is not about me, but still stay in it and care about the other person so that the other person feels safe to begin to talk about. I am just feeling so disrespected at work because everybody walks all over me. They don't listen to my ideas,
right.
and I'm jealous of you because you've got this big thing going on and it looks like you're really successful, and look at me over here, and I don't make as much as you, and I am just feeling so shameful because whatever is underneath that is really painful. And when that person can go to that depth, that pain, and touch on it, then we can meet them there. We can meet our partner there, and that can help to heal them.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And she said, I feel that people come into a relationship to be healed, which isn't fair. I'm not here to help you. I'm here to grow with you. I'm not your past.
Mhm.
And you're exactly right. You're not a person's
Mhm.
past. And you're right. Within relationships, you have to give 100, right? But I've always heard and been taught each person needs to give 50%. Well, that's 100%. But what if
Mhm.
today I may only be able to give you 35%, right? We both have to give it
Mhm.
100%. And it's not going to say you're going to be optimal every day in that relationship. There's going to be some times when you're going to falter. There's going to be some times you're going to say some things that you don't want anybody to hear because they'd be like, oh my God, is that really coming out of your mouth? Yeah, you're absolutely right. It happens. It's
Yes. A-
absolutely happens. No, go
And
ahead.
in
I'm
that
sorry.
100 and in that 100%, Lamar, it's important for me to take responsibility then for that day or for that thing that I said that, or for the way that I said that thing. What I said
Yes.
was right, but the way that it came out of my mouth was so explosive that I just verbal vomited all over my partner, right? And so to take 100% responsibility for my actions, my thoughts, my words, and my tone and how I've come across, but not to wear the other person's pain, but to care about it. I believe that we make a promise to care. When we make a commitment to another person, we make a promise to care about all of it, the good, the bad, and the
Mhm.
ugly. And so that's my responsibility to care about it, not to heal it, but at the same time, in that care and that love, healing happens.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And sometimes you're absolutely right. Sometimes relationships, I look at it as like a hospital, right? Because you can come in damaged, and that other
Mhm.
person can actually be almost like your savior without them even knowing. It's
Mm.
hard. Sometimes you kind of grow together. And she said it's hard to be it's hard to be a human and deal with a relationship too. Yes, it is. Relationships are not easy. Mm-mm. It's not. It is not easy. And trust me, this has been like for me, it's continuous. I almost have to have like I call them mental meetings with the people in my mind because sometimes it's easier to help someone else, and then meanwhile you're the one who needs the help too. And so it's like that. We struggle with that. Yeah, I mean, it is not always easy. Again, it's almost like you have to retrain yourself, because if you were raised that way, then it's,
Mm.
you just think, okay, this is the right thing and the right way to be, but it may not be for your relationship. What do you think about that, Ann?
Absolutely. I've spent a lot of time unlearning the things that didn't work, which were avoiding conflict, not being vulnerable in my most intimate relationship, and not knowing what that word even meant, that I could actually express how I'm feeling and what I need and what I want, that I didn't even know how to express that. In fact, I remember the first time that I actually expressed to my husband specifically, I said, I just need a hug. I had had a really bad day with the kids that day, and I was exhausted, depleted. It was just after supper time. The kids were off doing their own thing, and we were in the kitchen alone, and I looked at him and I said, I just need a hug right now. And he got up from his chair and he walked over to me and he gave me a hug, Lamarr, and I looked and I thought, what? It's this easy? All I need to do is ask for what I need.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. Because even sometimes kids need a hug, right? They do.
Yes.
If you've had a long day and it's been a very trying day, sometimes you just need a hug. But I'm proud that you asked for it, because ordinarily people wouldn't say, I need a hug. They wouldn't ask for it. And it's hard, especially to be vulnerable. It's almost like you're giving up your power. And we don't like to be taken advantage of. We don't like our feelings hurt. It's hard to be vulnerable sometimes. It can be so
Mm.
daunting.
It really is. I mean, it feels like we're emotionally naked, right? Um, and it, and if the person doesn't respond with care, then that feels even worse, like totally devastating. And if they don't respond the way we want them to respond because we haven't been specific and given clarity around, I'm
Mhm.
just not feeling good right now and I just need you, that's not really specific, but I just need a hug is very specific. So I
Yeah.
teach my people to speak with great clarity, and that's the second C, is to communicate and clarify.
Mhm.
Clarify what that means. What is it exactly that you're asking of him? Like, do you want him, like, let's say that this man is busy all the time, like he's away from the house all the time and you're lonely and you want to see more of him, but what you say is you want to see more of him. Well, I will say, well, what does that really mean? What are you
Mhm.
looking for? Because he doesn't know what it is, she doesn't know what it is either, and
Right.
then nobody is happy. Nobody gets their needs met in that way when we can't clarify what it is we really want. And we are so vague when we ask for what we need. We're so vague in our messages that the other person is completely lost
Yeah.
about what it is that we're asking for. And so I teach my
Mhm.
people to clarify and communicate so that your person knows what they're saying yes to and what they just can't meet. Like, there's sometimes we
Right.
ask for too much and they need to say no, or we need to negotiate. Okay, so you can't be home every night of the week.
Uh-huh.
That's not reasonable, but could you be home 2 nights a week, or however that works. That we
Yeah.
negotiate those things together.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I agree with you 1,000%. And again, it's almost like I said, it's that vulnerability part of it. Because as men, sometimes they're taught not to be vulnerable. You have that toxic masculinity, that's coming, and they don't want to show that they're hurting or show some type of emotions. They don't always want to, because then they'll be seeming like they're not the man in the relationship. So it's hard, because again, it's like how you were raised sometimes, but how you are raised and even in your environment really should not play a part in who you are today or even going forward.
It shouldn't, but it does. Man, the things that we have seen and the things that we've experienced, they come forward with us unless we process them and do something with them. And I have seen some of my clients have made the best choices coming out of a very difficult past because they've worked through and processed some of that stuff. And so then they're much better able to communicate and to have pivotal conversations that are powerful and effective because they've worked through some of that past. And that's a journey. I think that's a lifetime journey.
Yeah.
Um, but it's definitely one that's worth taking, because when we haven't dealt with that past, we get triggered so easily, and that makes
Mhm.
pivotal conversations extraordinarily difficult.
Right. It does. So let me ask you, how would you work with someone who, they don't like a lot of I call it gross conversation. They don't like a lot of conversation. They just want you to get right to the point and that's it. For me, I've always had to explain things because I
Mm,
never want my point to be missed. So how would
mm.
you work through that where you just have to get to the point? Because I've even heard people say, "Hey, get to the point. What's going on here?"
Well, when I'm working with people, as a coach, I do more listening and more asking questions than actually telling people what to do. Because I do believe that people have many of the answers inside of them.
Mhm.
They know their situation. They're an expert in their situation. I am not the expert in the situation. I'm an expert coach, but I'm not the expert of their life. And they are. They know all the nuances. They
Right.
know their past. They know their circumstances and their situation. And so I love to pull out of them those questions that we've just gone through. And I love to understand. And as we talk, it's so interesting. As they talk, they will say things that will surprise them. And they'll even miss it. And I'll say, "Do you know what you just said?
Yeah.
You you just said he's going to leave me like all the rest of them.
Wow.
Tell me what that means." "I said that?" "Yeah, you just said that." Well, let's talk about that. And so that's the point. The point is to get to the root of whatever is keeping them from the results that they really want. I want them to get results as quick as they can, to get to the place that they want to get. So we talk about goals first. What is your goal? What is it that you really want here? And then
Mhm.
we work toward getting to that goal. And we will look at, what are the fears that are holding you back, the habits, what is the knowledge that you need to move forward. For us, we needed to learn how to communicate and how to conflict in healthier ways. And then we talk about what are some of the distractions in your life that are keeping you from what you want. And then we get to the point.
Mhm. No, you're absolutely right. Again, it's just that whole vulnerability thing. I think we don't always want to, and sometimes it's hard because we can be in let's say, our career, where, especially as women, we don't always want to show that vulnerability side because we want to be looked upon as a strong person and a leader. And then
Mhm.
it's almost like it becomes a little difficult to shift gears into your relationship. And I've heard many people say, even clients say, I had to tell my partner that I don't report to you, and that's very difficult to kind of shift because when you think about it, especially nowadays, we're shifting our not just vulnerability, but how we communicate. When you think about it, it could be 3 or 4 times a day, even not more. We're going to communicate differently with, let's say, the with our mailman or mail person, right? Than we do with our colleagues, than we do with our spouse, even our children. So we're constantly, it's almost like being a chameleon where we're constantly shifting the way we communicate throughout the day.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. And I like to think about it as a wheel of vulnerability. And
Ah,
so, and we talk about that. So that the person in the core, I want to be 100% vulnerable with me, honest
yeah.
with me. And I'm in the core, but so is my other significant other. I need them to be in the core too. I'm going to be vulnerable. You only get to the depth of connection as you are vulnerable, I believe. So if I am not being vulnerable, I am smothering that connection possibility. And so they're in that core with me. And then outside of that are my children, and maybe then outside of that, my parents, and then
Mhm.
extended family and friends. My friends actually are a little closer than that. And then you're going to have the mailman way outside of that. Now you may need to have a pivotal conversation with the mailman about the way that they're throwing your mail around. That's why we say, um, when you're checking emotion, that's why we say it takes a degree of vulnerability or honesty, because there you're going to need some honesty with the mailman about that. But you're not going to be vulnerable with him like you are with your spouse.
Right. You don't want to be, and you're absolutely right. And what I have found is sometimes when you show too much of vulnerability, it could be your colleagues, it could be your children, anyone, they almost take it as a weakness. So, what do you think about
Mm.
that? Like, you're not being weak, you just want to show your emotions. I think that's fine.
Mm. And we're all different in that, aren't we, Lamar? Like some of us are more emotional than others.
Hmm.
And I think it's important to recognize our differences.
Yeah.
And so I think that at
Hmm.
work, we do not show the vulnerability that we show at home. That would not be appropriate. I don't need everybody to know my business. And when we're leading, we lead vulnerably differently than when we're working peer to peer.
Right.
And right. And so, but we all need safe places to be vulnerable because that's the way we grow. It enables me to be honest with myself when I have a safe place to be honest
Hmm.
and to be vulnerable. Yeah. And so I think it's important to kind of figure out where they are on that wheel of vulnerability and just as how vulnerable I'm going to be. I think the vulnerability is strength myself. I think there's incredible strength and vulnerability. And I've seen leaders lead really well with some vulnerability. They don't lay it all out on the line, but they give you something that's vulnerable that makes you feel like, oh, they're human too. I can follow them.
Right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I couldn't even have said it better. You're right. It's sometimes it's hard though to shift between work, children, and your spouse. It sometimes it is. I know for me, I have to take a step back. And the reason why I do that is because I want my partner to understand and know that I am not the same way at work, right? It's a little different because
Yeah.
you could be managing a team or projects or whomever, and it's not always the same thing. So sometimes it comes across as a little harsh.
Mm.
You know, it is. I mean, we sit down, we say, well, this is the way it should be, and this is what you should say. But we know, unfortunately, we can use some colorful words now. Yes, we can use some colorful words. And then next thing
Yeah.
you know, we apologize like, I didn't mean to say it like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a different role, isn't it? And I've seen that too with my husband, where he's leading 30 to 40 people at work, and then he comes
Mhm.
home, and I'll have to kind of remind him, "Oh, you're not at work now. It's okay.
Right,
You can take that tone off."
right. And you know what? I love the point you just made. It's like, I shift his mindset to let him know that no, I'm not your colleagues, I'm your
Mm,
partner, and we're not going to just talk that way. It's okay if you want to talk that way amongst other people, but for us, we want to maintain like a good, healthy foundation. We can't always just say what we want to say.
mhm.
Although, even for me, it's been like a slip of the tongue now. I have to say, I got to be honest about it. You
Yes,
know?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all fall into that. It doesn't matter how much we know or how much we learn. We're all human, right? And have to give ourselves some grace for that humanness that we all have and experience, and but still taking responsibility, like you did, and apologizing for the things that we say that hurt other people.
Right. And I've even said, like, look, I'm apologize, and this is wrong for me to say. I'm apologize for cursing you out. And it's almost like I apologize. It sounded good, but it wasn't really a true apology. You know, it truly was not. And sometimes it
Mhm.
can be very difficult. It can be very difficult. Again, how you were raised, it plays a part in it. That was your foundation.
Mhm.
And even going through life, I mean, it's It's a challenge.
Well, and it really is another skill is learning to apologize and learning what an apology looks like. Like just to
Mhm,
say that I'm sorry, well, what are you sorry for? And
mhm.
and then the follow up to that sorry. Because for me, if there's no action after the apology, there's no real apology, right? If I just keep doing the same thing that I was doing before, that's not an apology. That's more like abuse than apology.
Yeah, you're right. And it's hard to kind of call it out because sometimes we can be the abuser, but we
Mm,
like to look at the other people and say, no, it's them. But sometimes we are.
mm.
It can be very challenging, very difficult, to come to a happy medium where we're not cursing each other out or
Mm,
saying anything that's not derogatory.
and that comes back to that 100% responsible again. So yeah, that I am responsible for me. And for me, for those of your people who are looking for love. So I've been married for 42 years. But I work with people who are looking for love. And for those of your people who are looking for love, I would encourage you to take the time to get to know the person, to really understand that family background that is driving them, their beliefs and their values, so that your core values are not too far apart. I find when core values are too far apart, there's a lot of disagreement and arguments, and
Mhm.
it's hard to come together because you're so far apart on those core values. And so I would encourage your people just to slow down relationships so that you don't rush ahead. Keep your head in the game. Keep your
Right,
head in front of your heart so that you don't become too attached and too bonded too fast, so that when you do find out something about them that is just a deal breaker, that
right,
you
right.
can't be with somebody like that. You're not already so attached that you can't actually, it's hard to break up with them because you don't like what you
Yeah,
see, but you're already so connected. So I encourage my people, slow it down. Dr. John Van Eppet says it takes 3 months before we begin to see patterns of behavior. And that's what you're going to look for. You're going to look for the patterns because we all make mistakes and we don't want to dump everybody that makes a mistake. We'd be alone in the world. But we want to see those patterns of behavior. And I want to see the good patterns as much as you want to see the harder patterns that you don't want to live with.
right.
Something I decided at 15, Lamarr, was I was not going to live with addiction. I had seen enough addiction growing up. I broke up with a
Mhm,
boyfriend at 15 because they were drinking and driving, and I just said no, not interested.
mhm, mhm.
So know your values and stick to your values and make sure you're not too far apart, and take the time to get to know who it is that you're actually wanting to be with for a lifetime, because then you've got a lifetime to build a good life together rather
Right.
than doing all that fighting and arguing. And
Yeah,
yeah.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Sometimes it's like we, I don't want to say can't communicate because it's harder sometimes, but we learn different mechanisms so that we can communicate. And you're right, it's not easy at all. It is truly not. But we work toward it and we try to do better with ourselves.
Mhm.
Yes, we
Yes.
try to.
Yeah, and we can be better because all that we've talked about tonight are skills.
Yeah.
And the very definition of a skill means that I can learn to do better. I can learn new ways of doing things, new ways of
Mhm,
communicating, new ways of listening.
mhm.
Um, and that's a big part of our pivotal conversation course that we teach. And it's incredibly helpful to learn those new skills. So there's hope for everyone. We can learn those skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wanting to learn is different. We have to. Because even in our relationship, the things we say, that actually cascades to our professional life as well.
Yes.
You know, it really does. And then back to our communication with our children. All of that is like a circle. Everything
Love
is
it.
behind each other. And you're
Yeah.
the common denominator because you're right there in the center.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so that's what I love about these skills and why I think they should be taught in high school, or even in elementary school. Like we should be learning these skills because it impacts everything else that we do. They're transferable skills. If
Right.
I'm able to listen to my colleagues at work, if I'm able to listen to my boss and hear what they're really saying, if I'm able to understand better and accept 100% responsibility
Mhm.
for the mistakes that I make at work, how much better is that than trying to cover things up and just making matters worse and having things build up until I can't stay there any longer?
You're
Transferable skills.
no, you know what? You're absolutely right. That's a great point. Transferable skills, absolutely. You know, I can't even say anything about it, but you're absolutely right. And again, like even growing up in my household, we just thought that was just the way people communicate. There was no rule against it. We just like, okay, this is what it is. I can just tell you off. I can hurt your feelings. You'll get over it. And that's not always the case. Sometimes people actually shelter those feelings for a while.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. And it impacts all of us. And we all have to learn new ways of unlearn old ways that aren't working and relearn new ways, new skills to have effective pivotal conversations so that we can fall in love instead of having those same arguments over and over again.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And some things is just they were just attached to us that way. That's what we always heard. That's what we always remember. So those certain terms is just not for a weak at heart. It's just not. Wow, this was great. So you're you're escalating. The conversation is escalating. How do we say, okay, let me regroup so that I can
Yes.
speak at a normal turn?
Yes, and that's really good to recognize the conversation's escalating. This is getting worse. It's not getting
Mhm.
better. I like to say, you know what? I need some time here. I am getting upset. There's 100% responsibility. I'm getting
Yeah.
upset here. And I know that I need some time to process and to think. Can I come back to this conversation tomorrow? Can we talk about this tomorrow? I like to set a date or a time when we're going to come back to the conversation. Now,
Hmm.
some people will say, give me 30 minutes and I'm better. But, when we're triggered, there's a physiological thing that happens in our bodies and it takes about
Mhm.
30 minutes to settle down. I need the next day because once I settle down, I need to process and think. And so it's just to say, I'm really getting upset here, or I see that you're getting upset. Can we come back to this conversation tomorrow?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's hard to come back to that conversation, but it's doable. We're all about saving the relationships, and if communication is the main sticking point for this, is definitely something that we all need to learn and work on. It's not always easy.
No, and if a couple is having this same conversation over and over again, and it continues to get heated, I would say bring in a third party to mediate through that conversation, to help you through a listening exercise, so that you're able to actually have the conversation because it's obviously important to both of you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be hard, right? And so if it's a pattern of not getting anywhere and not doing well with the same conversation, I say bring in a third party. Get help sooner
Yeah.
than later. Don't wait for a long time like we did, Lamarr. Get help sooner than later.
Right. Right. But you have to recognize that you need the help.
Yes.
You have to recognize it. You can't say, well, and this is a statement that I hear talking, well, that's just how I am. But that doesn't mean
Oh,
it's right. I'm too old to change. This is how I've always been, and I'm not changing. What do you think about those statements?
I would not want to be with a person like that. That's what I think about that statement. That statement is I would like to know, help me understand what's going
Right.
on there. What is it that's keeping you from change? What makes you afraid of change? I would want to understand what's going on there because, um, life is about growth and
Right.
change, and the ability to be able to grow together is a beautiful thing to be able to do, to shift and move together.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, I hope people take heed of this because I know I will. This was something that needed to be done. You're right. These are just skills that you would think as an adult you already have the skills, but that's not necessarily the case. We always don't like to know that whatever our grandmother or our grandma or whomever, the way we were taught that it's right, and it may not be.
Mm.
You know?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
She said, "You're never too old to change. It's a poor excuse." You're absolutely right.
It
Absolutely right.
sure is. Yes. Yeah.
It is. And we have to work on these things because, again, when you get into these relationships, you're from two different backgrounds, right? So
Yes.
it doesn't mean that it's going to work for your situation, but it's something that probably needs to talk about. Even like, okay, well, how do you communicate? I think those things are important. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's very important to understand. And it's very important to watch and see what that looks like, because what comes out of our mouth might not be what really is
Right,
happening.
right,
And
no,
so
right.
we want to see the person through their own eyes, but we also want to see
Mhm.
them through our eyes. But then I want to see them through other people's eyes too. So I want to see what they're like in the grocery store with the clerk. I want to see respect for all people. And if they haven't got respect for all people, like they're not on my list of
Uh-huh.
favorite people.
Yeah.
That's just essential. It's just such a core value for me that happens. And so I want to
Yes.
see them in different situations and see how they communicate in different circumstances and
Hmm.
situations.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we have some great pointers here. I would love, love, love to have you back on because I think, I know for me, I've learned a lot today. You just think, okay, this is the way conversation is one sided, but it's not the way that it should be. So I want to
Mm.
say thank you so very much for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the Truth of the Matter podcast with Dr. Spencer. It's a pleasure to be here. I do have a gift for your people. Can I offer that gift,
We
Lamarr?
love gifts. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So if you've been listening to this and you've thought of a pivotal conversation that you need to have, and you're like, you've been putting it off because you just don't know how to do that, I have a free
Mhm.
resource. It's a 7-day challenge that can help you get ready for your next pivotal conversation. So every day we send out a short video and with a simple action step, because we need to take action in order for things to change. So it's a simple action step to help you prepare for your next pivotal conversation. So you can go from not knowing what to say or how to approach that pivotal conversation to knowing exactly what it is that you want to say and how to get ready for that next pivotal conversation. So you can go to For Better, that's the numerical number 4better, forever.com/challenge. And it's called the 7-day challenge. Love to see you there.
Wow.
And by the way, you can also stay in touch with me that way too. That's the best way, because when you go through that challenge, you can sign up for my weekly email. It's called the Tuesday Brew with Ann, because I love my coffee, Lamarr.
Oh, so do I. So do I. I have to say here too. You're absolutely right. Wow, this is really good stuff.
Yeah. So
Yes.
there I send out weekly communication tips to help you communicate in a way that aligns with your values.
Wow, I love it. I love it. When do you have time to do that?
Well, I work with my daughter, and
Good.
I'm blessed to have her on board, and she does a lot of the digital work for me, and so I'm very grateful for her.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so very much. We're going to do this again. I appreciate having you on and everyone in the chat who was asking questions. I thought that was phenomenal because, again, we're never too old to learn.
Never too old.
Never too
Yeah.
old to learn. Absolutely. But
Yeah.
thank you, Anne, for coming on. And I trust me with the ones that are in the chat. I know they had a good time because they were participating. That's what these conversations about, active communication.
That's so great, Lamarr, and it's great to see
Thank
Listen Up, Listen In here today. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you
Yes,
here again,
yes,
and it's a pleasure to meet you and chat with you today. So thank you for your insights as well, Lamarr.
yes. Well, I have to give them a shout out. They already know that. So those are my two friends. So we have Listen Up Listening. She's a fellow podcaster as well. They talk about all kind of things, which is really funny. And then we have my other friend who actually got me into podcasting, and she is from her name is Free Little, so she also has a podcast too, the Free Little um, podcast. So they're great. They're great too. So just in case, you guys, please, you can have Ann on, she can have you on. So I think this is great. And again, all of her contact information is going to be attached to this because she comes with a wealth of information that we all need. Absolutely. Yes. And she said, hey, man.
Hey,
Yeah.
Breezy. Nice to see you here.
Yeah. Right?
Yay.
Yeah, I tell you. So, like we're like one big happy podcasting family. I love it. I love it.
That's right. That's right,
Yeah.
Lamarr.
Yes, absolutely. So again, thank you so very much for coming, and everyone, thank you so very much for always supporting me. I love you all to death, but thank you, and we're going to say goodbye. She said, awesome show. I love it. And isn't she awesome? I feel like I've been knowing her forever.
Awesome.
Yeah, I tell you. I do feel like that. Like I've been knowing you forever. I love that. And I like to talk too. I do. I do. I'm a talkaholic. I'm like, oh geez. Yes. She said, I'll take some notes down for you. A matter of fact, I know I can talk because my daughter's always like, Mom, most people bring home stray animals, but you bring home stray people. You're always meeting a new friend. Yeah. She's always saying, you're always meeting a new friend. I'm like, I know. But
there.
thank you.
Bring me home, Lamarr. Bring me home.
Look, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Please. And look, I love, where you live in Canada. I want to come. Trust me, I've been trying to get there for the last 4 years. Had it not been for COVID, I would have been.
Come see me.
Yes.
Come see me.
I sure will. I will. But once again, everyone, thank you so very much. And, for joining in and participating. And we're going to say good night.
Good night, everybody.